Okay, in this next video, what I'm going to do is go through the practice handout on the production function, the second handout. Be sure you try it yourself first before going through this video. So you're hired as a consultant for the countries of Albernia, A, and Britannia, B. Each country's current relationship between physical capital per worker, little k, and output per worker, little y, is given by the curve labeled productivity. So we have little y over here and little k over here. Albernia is at point A, Britannia is at point B, and each country has the same production function, where the production function shows that output, total output in the economy, is a function of total capital, total labor, total human capital, and A, everything left over. So we can see the physical capital per worker in country B is 30,000. Their output is 40,000. Country A only has a physical capital of 10,000, only a third as much. And they're only half as of the standard of living as country B. Their output per person is only 20,000. Notice there's diminishing returns here from A to B. B has 3 times the more capital per person, but only double the output. So in this relationship here, depicted by the curve called productivity, what factors are held fixed? Well, this curve depends on capital per worker, K over L. So what's held fixed? Really everything else. Everything else except K over L. So other than little k, which is big K over L. Do these countries experience diminishing returns to physical capital per worker? Absolutely, because you can see by the shape of that curve it does. Assuming the amount of physical capital per worker and total factor productivity are held fixed. So A's held fixed, and little k is held fixed. Put a little bar over them. Can you recommend a policy to generate a doubling of output per worker? Oops. Oh, I made a mistake here. Human capital per worker. HC over L. Not physical capital per worker. That's different. Now we're saying that's held fixed and A is fixed. Can you recommend a policy to generate a doubling of output per worker? Well, that means everything's fixed except little k, K over L. So we could just increase that. So we could increase little k from 10,000 to 30,000. And that would move Albernia up to where point B is on the productivity curve. So their real GDP per worker would be the same. Now, in the next question, how would your policy recommendation change if the amount of human capital per worker and total factor productivity, A, were not fixed? Draw a curve on this diagram that represents your policy for Albernia. Okay, so we could increase human capital per worker. So we could increase HC over L, or we could increase A. Any of those would bump up the curve such that we could increase the curve so that with the same amount of physical capital per worker, we could have $40,000 of GDP per worker. So with a curve like that in the blue line, then we could get to a point right here and have the same real GDP worker without increasing the capital labor ratio. Now, how could that be done? Well, we increase human capital, of course, people's skills and abilities, or do something that increases A, and there's a million things that go into A. So something like trade, open to the rest of the world. That'll make the countries and the workers more productivity, and real GDP would go up. Reduce corruption, increase property rights, bring in technology from other countries. We would do something here in A, help change the form of government. Something like that could increase the worker productivity. So lots of other things that could be done besides just increasing the amount of capital per worker. Some of the undeveloped countries have problems with not enough capital, but many times the reason is that there's some problem here that really needs to be fixed in this A category. Some problems with their government, essentially some bad government policies that keep them poor. Okay, the last question. Suppose Britannia has a production function that looks like this. Does it show constant returns to scale? So we've got this production function here where total output is equal to A1, we'll call that some level of A, times capital to the 1/4 power, labor to the 1/2 power, and human capital to the 1/4 power. So now we've added in human capital to the production function. Is it constant returns to scale? Well, let's see. We double all inputs, output would double if it had constant returns to scale. So let's double the inputs. So we will double capital. We'll double labor. And we'll double human capital. And capital was to the 1/4 power. Labor was to the 1/2 power. Human capital was to the 1/4 power. So that's equal to A1 times 2 to the quarter times 2 to the 1/2 times 2 to the quarter times K to the quarter, L to the 1/2, human capital to the quarter. And that's going to be equal to A1 times 2 times K to the quarter, L to the 1/2, human capital to the quarter power. And that is 2 times A1, K to the quarter, L to the 1/2, human capital to the quarter. And we know that Y was equal to A1 times K to the quarter, L to the 1/2, human capital to the quarter. So that's equal to 2Y. So we can show that here that output doubles when all the inputs double. So it's got constant returns to scale. If we add any one of those things only, hold everything else constant, then we're going to see diminishing returns to that one thing. So we hold capital and labor constant, add more human capital, output will go up, but at a diminishing rate. There's going to be diminishing returns to human capital because it's the 1/4 power. So all of these show diminishing returns when we add just one or two together here. We've got to add all three of them together to get constant returns to scale. Okay, what we've done in this module is we've gone over production functions, which just shows the relation between output and inputs, where output is a function of inputs. We went over the Cobb-Douglas production function, which is y equals a times k to the alpha L to the beta. We like the Cobb-Douglas production function because it shows diminishing returns to scale, constant returns to scale, because alpha and beta is 1, but it shows diminishing returns to capital and labor. So if we just add capital, we'll have some diminishing returns. Just add labor, have some diminishing returns. We got to add both of them together to get constant returns. We went through the marginal products of K and L and showed that they're positive but decreasing. Then we looked at real GDP per worker, which is output divided by workers, Y over L, which is little y, and looked at that graph. And what that graph shows is productivity of workers. And that depends on, that graph shows that if we hold it a constant, then what's on the horizontal axis, the little k, capital per labor ratio, if that increases, it's called capital deepening. If it decreases, it's called capital dilution. The curve shows diminishing returns. So as we add more capital, holding everything else constant, output increases, but at a decreasing rate. So we can increase our productivity and hence our standard of living by adding more capital per person. That's one way. The other way is to increase A, whatever is in A. The capital labor ratio shows diminishing returns though. So if we keep adding more and more capital to a country, yeah, we'll increase output, but there's diminishing returns to it. If we increase output or productivity by increasing what is in A, then there's not diminishing returns because empirically A hasn't shown to have diminishing returns to it. And there's lots of things that are involved in A. Too many to mention here. But if we're going to grow, we have to increase productivity, worker productivity, because we pretty much grow at the rate that our productivity grows at. Now, if we want to increase our standard of living in the country, then we got to find ways to increase the worker productivity. And if we want to help the developing countries become wealthier, increase their standard of living, then we have to find ways for them to increase their productivity also. And if we want them to catch up with the developing countries, we got to increase their productivity even a faster rate than the productivity would increase in the developed countries.